So first of all, let's talk about even the name. Now I said a little bit of this last time, but even that character here, this one right there, that is the same Chinese character for Tao. That To and Tao are kind of the same. What does it mean? The way. So Shinto is what? The way of the Shin, usually called Kami. So the way of the Kami. Spirits. The way of the spirits. That's what Shinto means. We can really look at Shinto as a basic mythological understanding that's going on in Japan. But its rituals are often an admixture with Buddhism, as we'll see in a little bit. But this is something we really see relegated to Japan. So what do we see? First of all, I want to talk about the text in terms of myth. But again here, like we've seen in Taoism and Buddhism, there's not a overindulgence in the notion of texts. Like in other traditions, one should be saturated in the notion of various texts. Like if you're going to be a Christian, I need to be familiar with the Bible. If I'm going to be a Muslim, I need to understand the text of the Quran and the various hadiths. If I'm going to be a Jew, I need to immerse myself into the Torah, the Tanakh, the Midrash, and so forth. Not really here. Like you should be familiar with the stories, but there's not the sense that one needs to immerse themselves into text. So what text do we have? Really these two. What you see here, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. Now Nihon is the Japanese word for Japan. You ever see the word Japan actually comes from a Chinese word for the country, so I don't know why we don't call it just Nihon. So really, what you see there, we've got like ancient stuff going on, which has all these old stories about Japan, how the islands rose from the sea. And then you've got this early history of Japan, and those are really the main two texts. So you've got the ancient, like mythological stuff, and then you have a little bit of historical stuff. And I mentioned here the Tenchi Kabyaku, this creation myth. So here's how did Japan come into being? And really, it's seen kind of as central. This is the main thing to know. The formation of the Japanese archipelago. What's an archipelago? A series of islands. How did Japan come into being? There was this shapelessness, chaos, and then there was motion. And as the motion continued, these particles in motion rose and became the islands of Japan. That's one thing you need to know. That's part of the myth. And Japan really being the thing that was created. Not the earth, the world, no, the islands of Japan. And when this happened, these early gods came into being. Now I'm using gods there. We could really call them just big spirits. That's what they are. The first god that we see really is just there first. We don't really know too much about him. But the other gods are what? The god of land and the god of agriculture. What does that suggest to you? What's important in early Japanese society? Land and agriculture. Sense of like the land itself has a kind of holiness to it. Now we've seen other religions talk about sacred places. But the very country, if you will, itself is sacred in Shinto. Not just any land, the Japanese land. Nihon. And where it gets confusing, and you see these Shinto gates, there's this sort of, if the cross is the symbol of Christianity and the crescent moon is the symbol of Islam, what we see here, and others, okay, the old swastika being the symbol of Jainism, this gateway, marking, you'll see these all over Japan, marking this is a place where spirits are welcomed in. That's what the gate signifies. This is a place where spirits are welcomed. What spirits? Any and all spirits. The word for spirits is common. Well, what do these spirits include? Well, I mentioned some gods earlier, but it really is a broad matrix that can include all kinds of stuff. So we've got those early Japanese gods. They're in here. Potentially one's ancestors. There might be a spirit of your ancestors dwelling with you. What would be some other spirits? You hear about spirits or gods in another religion on another continent. Other gods. They might be spirits too. Even later, Buddha achieved enlightenment, even maybe Buddha. And maybe plural, maybe there's multiple Buddhas. Maybe they're spirits too. And they're welcomed in. To the point where when you're looking at Buddhism in Japan, and you're looking at Shinto in Japan, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to extricate the analysis of one from the other because of their history. Add to that, especially those two, but add to that, there are also layers of Confucianism and Taoism in Japan as well, such that they're interstitched. So, let's take a look. I'm going to play a little bit about the relation and then say a few comments. What is the dominant religion in Japan? Is it Buddhism? Or is it Shinto? And the answer is yes. Now you saw there's a bit of a distinction, and I wanted to show that because I want to show some imagery of some practices going on. You saw them there pouring water on themselves. Shinto is much about cleansing oneself to present oneself before kami. Okay, but kami, that's a plural term for all various spirits of any kind. What you saw there over the course of Japan's history, there's been this back and forth between is it Buddhism and Shinto together? There's a back and forth, almost like an inhaling and an exhaling of how they come together. But he also said there pretty early on that it almost seems to be the case. Some have maybe it's an overstatement, but some have said that basically Shinto in Japan for the past 1,000 years is basically Buddhism. So what's going on there? How could these two fuse together so seamlessly? And also, this didn't include the Taoist elements and the Confucian elements that are going on as well. So if the kami are our ancestors, we owe them filial piety as well, do we not? So there's an obligation for that Chinese concept of qiao that we need to honor our ancestors. So is this something, not just would your father be proud of this, but would this honor your ancestors, your entire family tradition, whether they be living or not? That is incorporated in here as well. Don't dishonor one's ancestors. But we also see, what does it take to be a kami? And there was this dialectical tension almost between, do we allow foreign gods to become kami too? Sure. They can be kami as well, but then no, those are foreign. We don't want to invite those foreign gods in. What will happen is that could make our kami already angry. So no, keep them out. What's going to make Japan Japan? And you saw even the Meiji Restoration. So that was where I don't want to get into Japanese politics. But even with when modern Japan as such starts in the Meiji period, there's this kick out the Buddhism. We're going to focus on sort of a Shinto inherent Japanese identity, but that dissipated over time to the point where today, as it said, the veneration of kami, that's everyday life stuff. And where do you see Buddhism? That's funerary rites. People achieve enlightenment. So stuff that has to do with afterlife involves Buddhism, but daily life involves Shinto, to the point where you can really say that the two are distinct, but fused in that way. And like I said, Taoist elements as well, of flowing like nature, and Confucian elements of the honor of family. And I'll say this, that it's not just relegated to stuff from East Asia as well. I'll say this by way of example, that there may even been, not an influence, but an interaction, even from farther west. Now, who's front and center here? Hey, it's Buddha. Who's this? Hercules. Why is Hercules there? And this is from India, by the way. Why is there Hercules with Buddha? And you can find a whole host of these. How did that happen? Do you remember how the Greeks came into parts of India? In fact, the last Greek kingdom was a Buddhist kingdom in what today would be Afghanistan. Parts of Pakistan, parts of Iran. Okay, it was the last Greek kingdom to persist. Well, introduction of Greek gods. Now, but what's interesting is it doesn't just stop there. This continues to the point where in Japan there is a kami. This is Neo, looking strong. He's mad. What does he do? This is a kami. What does this kami do? He is Buddha's bodyguard. in Japanese religion. What's his origin? That's Hercules. There's this Hercules that has evolved into the notion of a Hercules as a guardian of Buddha all the way into Japan to the point where it takes on another character. This is Neo. Why am I pointing this out? Because I want to again stress something that I said early on in the semester about the rhizomatic connection between religions. We usually think of religions, sort of in an arboreal fashion, like they're like this, and now they're distinct. There's the Abrahamic and the Indian, and there's the Czech. Sure, you can do that. But there's also this rhizomatic connectivity as well. So the individual gods here are syncing up with the other stuff going on as well. Like we see here. Oh, so Neo is basically a Japanized version of Hercules. No, it's their own thing. Neo is a legitimate thing. But we see these analogs happening. Okay, it need not be, they've taken the correct version of Hercules and turned it into something else. No. There's something over and alongside. There's a tradition going on there too. So these structures are growing together, over and alongside each other at the same time. Point where, yes, Hercules can be a kami.